2020 will be a bloodbath in terms of big releases, with the first half being pretty quiet. Many games that actually were supposed to launch between February and May have all been delayed to the second half, and we'll now be fighting with all the other titles that will launch in that second half as well. And then there are still many games that are not announced yet, but that will very likely launch this year, like the new Assassin's Creed and that Batman game. There's also something else going on that could impact this year's releases, so a lot to discuss. Would be nice if you could leave a like on the video, and let's go. It's really weird how we're already 2 months into 2020 and it has been very quiet in the gaming space while we know a ton of stuff is going to happen this year. Like Doom Eternal is the first game of 2020 that I plan to extensively cover, and that one is coming out on March 20th, while last year we already had Kingdom Hearts, Far Cry New Dawn, Sekiro and even more. And yeah, overall the first half of 2020 is pretty quiet. We have the Final Fantasy VII Remake in April, just like the Resident Evil 3 Remake a week before that, and of course The Last of Us Part 2 in May. So really 4 major games that will really sell millions of copies, not counting the Nintendo titles, of course. And that is really nothing compared to the summer and the rest of the year that we got ahead of us. It will be a slaughter, like not all the games will do well, that's impossible. And it's pretty interesting how Ghost of Tsushima, the PS4 first party game, that we only have 3 trailers of so far. That last one in particular looked amazing. Either way, this game does not have a release date yet, only summer 2020. But yeah, you would think that they want to launch this before Avengers and Cyberpunk 2077, right? That release on September 4th and September 17th respectively. Again, I think that Ghost of Tsushima looks very good and Sucker Punch can make great games. But it will be very hard for this new IP to compete with a game in one of the biggest franchises in the world, Avengers, and a game from one of the best developers in the world, CD Projekt Red. Maybe they push the game to October, but on the other hand, then you are too close to the PlayStation 5 launch. So I really think a release date at the end of August makes the most sense, because developers normally want to be as far away from the summer period as possible, because during that time people are on a holiday break and are just not playing as much on their console. So really curious what that Ghost of Tsushima release date will be. Again, they're launching in a very crowded period. Outriders, that new co-op third-person shooter that I got to play and actually really like, moved away from their initial summer 2020 window because it was getting too crowded. I asked them about their new holiday 2020 release window in an interview, and they really said that because of other releases, they are now moving to holiday 2020. It likely mostly has to do with Avengers. I would imagine that Square Enix does not want to release 2 RPG type of games around the same time. But yeah, I would argue that holiday 2020, so end of October, November, is even more crowded. Apart from the yearly Call of Duty, we got of course the sports games and the big Ubisoft titles that I will touch on in a second. We also got the launches of 2 new consoles. We already know that Godfall is a launch game for the PlayStation 5, but it will be one of many. The PlayStation 4 had 23 launch games with 4 to 5 PS4 exclusives. It is possible that Horizon Zero Dawn 2 is a launch game for the PlayStation 5, or that Bluepoint remake that they are working on that is likely Demon's Souls. And there are many more titles that we're not thinking of, like a new Ratchet & Clank maybe, that could be a launch title for the PS5. And we also have the Xbox Series X that is launching with a new Halo game that has been in development for more than 5 years by the time it comes out. I could only see a new Forza game happening this year as well. Like, there are really a ton of games coming out. I'm just not sure if people will give Outriders the time it deserves if there are so many other games asking for your attention. Like, I really hope they delay it to early 2021, like early February or maybe even January, so it has more time to breathe. And I can't help but feel the same for Watch Dogs Legion. Like, right now it seems to be coming out this fall. We will actually hear more about the game in May, and Ubisoft has 5 AAA games, so not including Just Dance and Roller Champions, between October 2020 and March 2021. We got 2 announced games and 1 unannounced game in October, November or December, and 1 announced game and 1 unannounced game in early 2021. And the 2 unannounced games are very likely Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, as Jason already teased on Twitter. And the 3 already announced games are Gods and Monsters Watch Dogs Legion and also Rainbow Six Quarantine. that were all delayed from the early 2020 period. Ubisoft is now making a pretty big deal about Rainbow Six Siege being available at the launch of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, so you would think that they want to use that moment as well to push the game again, and I'm sure it will receive a physical edition for the PS5 and Series X too. So do they really want to release Rainbow Six Quarantine around that holiday 2020 window then too, when they also have this next gen version of Rainbow Six Siege? So let's, for the sake of this video, say that Gods and Monsters, Watch Dogs Legion and the new Assassin's Creed as that unannounced game will release in October or November. Again, December is also possible on paper, but games don't really release in December. So still, that's pretty wild. 3 pretty big games in 2 months. And they're all 3 big Ubisoft open world games that are designed to keep you engaged for tens of hundreds of hours with an extensive post-launch as well. Not sure if that will be the case for Gods and Monsters, but it will totally be the case for the new Assassin's Creed of course, and Watch Dogs Legion too. But yeah, then you have Cyberpunk launching a few weeks before that, and while it will not be as long as The Witcher 3, it should have more replayability than that game. CD Projekt Red already confirmed that it will have a ton of free post-launch content though, like The Witcher 3, and then later we can expect some big expansions. Where will we find the time and money to play all these big open world games launching a few weeks after each other? And that's not even everything, because I've said many times before in other videos that new Batman game for the end of this year makes a ton of sense too. Warner Montreal already teased this game a couple of times, and they should have been working on it for quite a while. Their last game was namely Batman Arkham Origins that launched in October 2013, right before the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and something similar could totally be happening right now. They revealed Arkham Origins at the start of April 2013, so we will know soon enough if this game is still slated for this year. You know what's crazy? GTA 5 was the most downloaded game in January 2020 in the US PlayStation Store. Yes, that re-release came out in 2014, and now more than 5 years later, it can still chart as the #1. Like sure, the PS5 and Series X are backwards compatible, but I would not be surprised if 2K also released a next-gen version of GTA 5 and Red Dead around the launch of the new consoles. Like, they would be stupid not to do that, right? EA has 4 major games before March 2021, excluding the sports games, but likely including a Mass Effect trilogy remake. They first planned a new Star Wars game for the end of this year, but that was sadly cancelled, so I totally expect another title from them, maybe 2, this fall. Bethesda so far only has Doom, again it looks awesome, but will they have something else later this year, maybe a surprise launch for Deathloop from Arcane? Some people think that Starfield might be ready this year, that they will do like a Fallout 4, so re-reveal the game and then release it a few months later. I don't believe it, but yeah, it is possible. With or without an extra Bethesda game, it's going to be a bloodbath either way if everything releases in September, October or November. And I totally forgot to mention some games in this video too, like I'm sure, let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, games can of course move though. 2020 is the year of delays, and maybe developers now want to avoid the insanely crowded end of the year period. But there's also something else that could have an impact on these 2020 titles, the coronavirus. We already discussed the fact that many companies are pulling out of conventions like PAX and GDC. The Nintendo Switch has stock issues because of the outbreak, something that could totally have an impact on the next-gen consoles as well. And not only that, many companies outsource art assets or other things to Chinese studios. It's for example known that Guerrilla Games does a ton of outsourcing, so what if those studios cannot go to work and finish their part of the game? Will Horizon 2 then still release in time if it was indeed planned as a launch game? I don't think it will launch alongside the PlayStation 5, it is still possible though, but this was just an example because many AAA games these days work with outsourced game dev virtues. Like recently they worked on Jedi Fallen Order or Devil May Cry 5, and they also worked on Assassin's Creed Liberation Remastered. According to Wikipedia, they have development studios in Chengdu, Xi'an and Ho Chi Minh City, and I hope I of course pronounced that right. But yeah, what if these people cannot come to the studio to work on their game? Schedules will be a mess, and we might see either less content-rich games at the end of this year or more delays. And I of course hope that this is not the case, and it is worth pointing out that of course the health of these employees is the #1 priority, and the game delays are not high on the list of concerns. But yeah, we are discussing the crazy 2020 end of the year lineup of course, and then this could have an impact. I still stand behind my video though, saying that 2020 could be one of the best years in gaming. The Last of Us Part 2 is about to redefine AAA games, says the co-director. Like, it is coming out this year and looks phenomenal. CD Projekt Red says that Cyberpunk 2077 will be better than The Witcher 3 in every way. And we got It saying that Doom Eternal is the best game they have ever made. These three should already make 2020 amazing, and I also can't wait to tell you about my Final Fantasy VII Remake hands-on that I had recently. 2020 will be different than we thought at the start of this year, but it will still be awesome thanks to the amount of quality games that are set to release. And to be honest, if things like Outriders, Watch Dogs Legion or other titles get delayed to 2021, I would be happy. Because I know that while I want to play those games a ton, I already have my hands full with the new Assassin's Creed, Cyberpunk, Ghost of Tsushima. And yes, of course, I can't wait for Horizon 2, but please launch it in 2021 and not as a launch title, because there's already so much coming out. Subscribe for coverage on all the big 2020 titles, like this video to support the channel, and follow me on Twitch if you haven't already. Twitch.tv/JorRaptor. I will go live every Monday, so check it out. You can watch my big PS5 video by clicking on the screen, and I will speak to you next time. Goodbye.